The asphalt shimmered under the rain, but the heat came from the engine of the SUV waiting for me. The window rolled down slowly, revealing the gaze of someone who didn't take no for an answer. Mark had his hand on his car door, but her voice sliced through the night. "If you want to leave, I'll drive you myself." In that moment, caught between Seattle's cold and the expensive perfume drifting from inside that car, I realized it wasn't just my path she wanted to control, it was my breathing. Have you ever felt like someone's care was actually a refined way of holding you captive? Girls, before we continue our story, I need to share something incredible with you. You know that feeling when you're watching a scene and suddenly you crave so much more? Like you want to go beyond the lines, to truly live, feel, and hear every ounce of intensity and passion that Sapphic love carries, the way it deserves to overflow? Here on this platform, I have to follow very strict guidelines to keep our space safe and to continue bringing you this beautiful representation for free. But I wanted to give you more. I needed to create something deeper, something complete for us. That's why I've just created our VIP universe, a secret, exclusive refuge where our stories finally come to life in their full form. No limits, no cuts, just raw, immersive storytelling with all the depth, emotion, and detail we love. Over there, my creativity flows freely, and the stories unfold exactly the way they're meant to. If you're ready to dive headfirst into this premium world and unlock full access to everything waiting for you, your key is already there, in the pinned comment right below. And there's more. By joining, you're not just enjoying powerful, complete stories. You're directly supporting my work and helping this channel grow every single day. Click the link, come be part of this world, and let's live these stories together. The rain in Seattle was not just water falling from the sky. It was a gray, heavy curtain that seemed to want to wipe out the streetlight glow and the neon signs of the cafe where Maya worked. The double shift had left her shoulders heavy, a dull ache throbbing at the base of her neck every time she tried to stretch. Outside, the parking lot was almost empty, except for Elena's silver SUV, parked directly under the brightest light, like a sentinel. Maya adjusted the strap of her backpack, feeling the damp fabric against her uniform. The cold Washington night air rushed into her lungs as soon as she pushed the glass door, and the sound of a stranger's car tires cutting through the puddles drew her attention. It was Mark, one of the stock supervisors, easing the speed of his old sedan, the passenger window rolling down with a metallic creak. "Hey, Maya," Mark shouted over the rain, a friendly, unpretentious smile on his face. "Want a ride? The weather is awful for waiting for the bus." Maya hesitated for a moment. The idea of a dry seat and his car's heating sounded like a miracle. But before she could open her mouth to thank him, Elena's SUV engine roared and cut through the atmosphere. The silver vehicle's door did not open, but the tinted glass lowered just enough for Elena's dark, sharp eyes to meet Maya's through the gloom. The silence that followed was louder than the storm. Mark looked from one to the other, his smile withering as he sensed the sudden change in air pressure. He didn't understand the dynamics, didn't know why the most influential woman in that regional franchise was there at that hour, but he felt he was interrupting something that shouldn't be seen. Elena did not say a word to him. She simply kept her gaze fixed on Maya, a silent command that admitted no replies. I think not, Mark. Thank you," Maya murmured, her voice almost swallowed by the water's noise. "I already have a way to go." Mark nodded, confused, and accelerated, leaving behind the smell of burnt oil and the sense that Maya had just crossed an invisible line. She walked to the SUV, heavy steps, feeling the water seep into her canvas sneakers. When she opened the passenger door, the car's interior heat hit her like a forced hug. The smell of new leather, espresso, and Elena's citrusy, expensive perfume filled the space, creating a bubble of isolation from the rest of the world. Elena had her hands firm on the wheel, knuckles white, the profile rigid against the dashboard light. She didn't look at Maya when she got in. She just waited for the seatbelt to click before shifting into gear. "I already told you I don't want you accepting rides from strangers, Maya." Elena's voice was low, a vibration that seemed to come from the chest, devoid of any softness. Not even from coworkers who think they can be kind for no reason. "He was just trying to help, Elena," Maya tried, but the sentence died mid-utterance when Elena abruptly turned her face, the intensity of her expression making Maya's heart stumble. It was raining. I was going to get everything wet. "If you want to go home, I'll take you myself." "I always take you," Elena interrupted, her right hand releasing the wheel for a second to gesture vaguely, a short, possessive movement. No matter the time, no matter what I'm doing, you don't get into anyone else's car. Understood? Maya looked away toward the windshield, where the wipers fought against the amount of water. The chest rose and fell irregularly. There was a frightening certainty in that prohibition, a kind of care that bordered on control, but deep in her tired mind she couldn't completely reject it. Was that the feeling of being truly seen by someone? Or was it only Elena's fear of losing control over the only space where she allowed herself to be vulnerable? The car slid out of the parking lot, onto the main highway. The city lights blurred as colored smears through the wet glass. No one spoke for long minutes. The silence was thick, loaded with things Maya wanted to ask, but the natural authority of Elena prevented her from articulating them. Sometimes you get used to the weight of a presence that demands everything from you, and you forget what it's like to walk alone in the rain. If you've ever felt someone's care was both your safe harbor and your own storm, perhaps you recognize what Maya is going through now. If this story is touching something real for you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep telling these meetings and misadventures that life insists on putting in our path. The radio was off. Elena drove with surgical precision, but Maya noticed a slight tremor in her hand when the traffic light turned red. Elena wasn't the type to tremble. She was the rock, the structure, the woman who ran meetings and decided the futures of dozens of people without blinking. But there, in that metal and glass cubicle, surrounded by the darkness of the American night, something seemed to be cracking. Maya extended a hand, uncertain, stopping a few centimeters from Elena's arm. She wanted to touch the sleeve of the silk blazer, feel the texture of the fabric, confirm that the woman beside her was real and not just a projection of her own desires and fears. "You're mad," Maya stated, more as a self-calibration. "I am not mad," Elena answered quickly, eyes fixed on the road, though the signal was still red. "I'm just ensuring that things stay where they belong." "And where do I belong, Elena?" The question escaped before Maya could filter it. Elena finally looked up. It wasn't a boss's look, nor a protective one. It was something deeper, something that sought in Maya an answer she herself didn't have the courage to formulate. The red light of the traffic signal reflected on Elena's face, painting her skin with a warm, dangerous hue. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words seemed to stall in her throat. The sound of a horn behind them cut the moment. The signal had changed. Elena redirected her attention to the road, accelerating more than necessary, the tires briefly singing on the wet asphalt. The touch of Maya never arrived, but the electricity between the two hands, separated by only a few centimeters of cold air, continued to vibrate, a silent promise of a conflict that was only beginning to take shape. Maya rested her head against the cold glass, feeling the engine's vibration. She thought about how life had changed since Elena had entered her. The ordinary routine of a young woman trying to pay for college in Portland had been replaced by this constant tension, by these unspoken rules and rides that felt like rescues. She knew she should feel suffocated, but there was something in the way Elena said, "I'll take you myself," that made Maya feel, for the first time, that she belonged somewhere, even if that place was just the passenger seat of a car in motion, heading toward a destination neither of them had the courage to admit. The rain continued, and the way home seemed increasingly long, as if time were dilating just to keep them there, in that bubble of silences and prohibitions. The entrance to the building where Maya lived, on a side street in Capitol Hill, did not match the car Elena's metallic shine. The pavement there was uneven, and the smell of wet asphalt mingled with the scent of cheap food coming from a corner takeout that still insisted on keeping its lights on. Elena parked close to the curb but did not switch off the engine. The SUV kept rumbling softly, a constant sound that filled the void between them. Maya looked at her own hands, nails slightly stained with coffee, and the work apron folded in the backpack released a persistent scent of steamed milk. It was a painful contrast to Elena's perfection. Elena never looked tired. She seemed merely ready. "This place isn't safe," Elena said, her voice cutting through, eyes tracing the building's facade with its peeling windows. "The main entry lock is loose again. I've lived here for 2 years, Elena. I know how to deal with the lock," Maya replied, trying to find the doorknob, but not in a hurry to leave. Not everyone lives in 24-hour security condominiums in Bellevue. It isn't about privilege, Maya. It's about... Elena stopped, fingers drumming on the leather steering wheel. It's about not needing to expose yourself. You expose yourself every time you drop me off here, Maya retorted, finally turning toward her. The yellow streetlight outside entered through the glass, creating deep shadows under Elena's eyes. Why do you do this? It's past midnight. You have an 8 o'clock meeting with the East Coast investors. I know. I saw your calendar on the tablet this morning. Elena didn't respond immediately. She pressed her lips, a fine pale line, and diverted her gaze to the car's digital panel. She had that flaw, the inability to admit that her presence there wasn't strategic but necessary. For her, control was a form of affection, but for Maya it seemed only a wall that could not be crossed. Elena stretched out her hand to the back seat and took a long, heavy-handled umbrella, extending it to Maya. Take it. I don't need it. It's only 10 steps to the door. Maya. Take it. Elena's voice rose by half a tone, not in anger, but in a contained urgency that always made the hairs on Maya's arms stand on end. Please. Maya accepted the object, feeling the weight of the cold metal. Her fingers brushed Elena's for a second longer than necessary. Elena didn't remove her hand immediately. They stayed there, connected by that object, while the rain hammered on the car's roof with renewed force. The air inside the vehicle seemed to have run out. Maya felt the warmth emanating from the other woman, a silent invitation that Elena would never verbalize. Elena was made of protocols and successes, but in that touch, Maya felt a crack, a vulnerability Elena tried to hide under layers of authority and expensive blazers. You want to go up? Maya's question was almost a whisper, filled with an uncertainty she hated feeling. The coffee is terrible, but it's warm. I don't drink store-bought coffee, you know that, Elena said, but there was no arrogance in her voice, only sudden weariness. And I really do have that meeting. Fine. Of course. Maya released the umbrella and opened the door. The cold hit her like a slap, contrasting with the warm microclimate they had created inside. Good night, Elena. Maya. Maya stopped with one foot outside the car, the rain beginning to soak her hair. Lock the door. Both of them. The street door and the apartment door, Elena ordered, her dark eyes gleaming in the shadows. And don't answer if someone knocks. Maya nodded, a half smile curling her lips. She shut the door and ran toward the building's entrance, hearing Elena's SUV recede only after the main lock's snap confirmed she was inside. Up the narrow, poorly lit stairs, Maya felt the weight of the umbrella in her hand as if it were a trophy or a chain. Elena didn't know how to be close without trying to save Maya from dangers that often didn't exist, and Maya didn't know how to be saved without losing her own voice in the process. Inside the small apartment, the silence was absolute. Maya threw her backpack onto the worn couch and went to the window, watching the light trails that Elena's car had left on the wet street. She wondered if Elena, in her immaculate and vast home, felt as alone as she did at that moment. Elena was the kind of person who fixed everything for others, but kept her own life in a state of suspension, stored in crystal boxes that no one was allowed to open. The next day, Seattle's sun, that pale, unwarm brightness that barely dried the puddles, found Maya back at the cafe. The scene was chaotic. The sound of espresso machines and the hubbub of customers complaining about delays created a cacophony she tried to ignore. And then she saw her. Elena wasn't in the car. She was standing at the end of the line, wearing a dark gray overcoat that made her look like a lost urban deity among mortals. She wasn't looking at her phone. She was looking straight at Maya, with an expression that wasn't control, but something far more dangerous. Anticipation. Next, Maya called, her voice faltering slightly as Elena stepped forward. A black tea. No sugar, Elena said, the professional tone returning to dominate the space. And I need to talk to you about the weekend. Elena, I'm working. There are 10 people behind you. I bought your day off, Maya, Elena said calmly, sliding a small envelope across the stained wooden counter. I spoke with the regional manager. You're free starting now. Maya looked at the envelope, then at Elena's eyes, which did not blink. Maya's face warmed. It wasn't gratitude she felt, but a mix of humiliation and an overwhelming desire to accept whatever was in that envelope, just to avoid facing another day of double shifts. But Elena had crossed a line. Again. You can't do this. Maya hissed, leaning over the counter. You can't simply buy my time as if I were one of your assets. I didn't buy your time, Maya. I bought your peace of mind, Elena retorted, her voice maintaining an exasperating calm. You are exhausted. Your fingers are trembling while you hold this cup. If you can't take care of yourself, someone has to. And that someone has to be you? Always you? Maya felt her throat tighten. Why can't you just be normal? Why does everything have to be a contract or an order? Elena hesitated. For a brief moment, the mask of the director behind her own life wavered. She looked around, noticing the curious looks from other customers and the discomfort of the manager watching from afar. She stepped back, her hands dipping into the pockets of the overcoat. Because if I'm not like this, Maya, Elena began, but the sentence died there, unfinished, hanging between them like the coffee steam. If I'm not like this, I don't know what would be left. She turned and left the cafe without waiting for the tea, leaving the envelope on the counter. Maya stayed there, motionless, as the city's ambient sound began to invade her senses again. She realized Elena wasn't trying to control her just for power. She was trying to stay whole through Maya. And that perception was scarier than any prohibition on accepting rides. Seattle's downtown lights looked like tiny diamond needles piercing the fog's cloak rising from Puget Sound. On the 40th floor of the glass building where Elena kept her main office, the silence was so dense that Maya could hear the metal ticking of the heating system adjusting. She held the brown envelope between her fingers, the paper slightly crumpled by the sweat of her hands. Maya shouldn't have been there. She didn't belong on that plush carpet muffling her steps, nor to that panoramic view making the world look like a chessboard. But Elena's gestures weight in the cafe, that authoritative purchase of her time, burned in her chest like a chemical burn. She crossed the empty anteroom. The secretary had already left, and she stopped in front of the dark oak door. You can't simply erase me from my own life, Maya said, without knocking, pushing the door with a courage she didn't know she possessed. Elena stood by the window, with her back to the entrance. She didn't startle. The reflection of her silhouette in the glass was a perfect line, a break in the skyline of high-rises. She held a crystal glass with something that looked like amber liquid, the ice clinking solitary. City light shaped the contour of her jaw, revealing a tension she rarely showed in public. Elena turned slowly, her eyes traveling over Maya from head to toe, lingering on the damp canvas shoes that left small watermarks on the immaculate floor. She didn't look angry about the intrusion. She looked hungry in a way Maya couldn't name. You came to return the envelope. Elena didn't ask, she stated, her voice trailing through the space like heavy velvet. It's a predictable choice, Maya. Almost disappointing. Predictable? Maya stepped forward, the envelope trembling in her hand. You tried to buy me, Elena. You came into my workplace, in front of everyone, and decided I didn't need to be there anymore. Who do you think you are to decide what I can endure or not? I am the person who sees you crumble while everyone else just asks for another coffee. Elena walked toward her, each step measured, closing the distance with a silent predation. I see the color of your dark circles under this artificial light. I see how your hand falters when you try to note a simple order. I didn't buy you, Maya. I cleared the way for you to breathe. Why does that scare you so much? Because I didn't ask for oxygen. Maya's scream died halfway, becoming a labored whisper when Elena stopped a few centimeters away. Elena's scent was stronger there. It wasn't just citrus perfume. It was something warmer, something that reminded of old paper and the electricity that precedes a summer storm in Kansas. Maya felt the heat radiating from Elena's body, a radiation that made the chill of her damp clothes unbearable. Elena reached out, but did not take the envelope. Instead, her long, cold fingers brushed Maya's pulse, exactly where the heartbeat was out of control. The touch was light, almost non-existent, but Maya's physical reaction was violent. Her knees buckled for a fraction of a second, and she had to lean on the edge of the marble table behind her. Elena did not retreat. She followed the motion, leaning over Maya, surrounding her with her perfume and her will. You're trembling again, Elena murmured, her eyes fixed on Maya's mouth. Is it anger or exhaustion? Tell me, Maya. I want to hear you say it. It's you. Maya let go, honesty escaping before pride could stop her. It's the way you look at me as if I'm a problem you need to solve. I'm not one of your architectural projects. I don't need you to redesign me. Elena released a short, humorless laugh, and her hand rose from Maya's wrist to Maya's neck. Elena's thumb caressed the line of the jaw, a gesture of such sudden intimacy that the air seemed to leave Maya's lungs. Elena's skin was soft, but there was a strength there, an authority that wouldn't accept no as an answer. The silence in the office became suffocating. Outside, a low thunder echoed, vibrating the glass of the windows, but neither of them looked away. The desire there wasn't gentle. It was a denial, a fight for territory between two women who didn't know how to surrender without losing themselves. Elena brought her face closer, breath brushing Maya's cheek. "And what if I don't want to solve you?" Elena asked, her voice dropping to a register Maya had never heard, something that bordered on the plea hidden beneath the command. "And what if I just want you to stay where I can see you, where no one else can offer you an exit that isn't me?" "That's sick," Maya whispered, though her body instinctively leaned forward, seeking contact her mind condemned. "You want to lock me in a golden cage just because you can't stand the idea that I have a life where you're not the center. You're already the center of mine, Maya, and you didn't even notice." Elena's confession felt like a physical blow. Her hand tightened on the back of Maya's neck, pulling her closer, until their foreheads touched. "I spend my meetings thinking if you've eaten. I look at those profit charts, and all I see are coffee stains on your apron. I prohibited those rides because the idea of you in a closed space with another man, feeling the heat of someone who isn't me, that eats me away." Maya felt a solitary tear slide down. Not from sadness, but from the unbearable tension of being so close to something she desired and feared with the same intensity. She released the envelope. The paper fell to the floor with a dull sound, forgotten. Her hands, previously clenched in fists, timidly rose to Elena's shoulders, clutching the expensive fabric of the blazer as if it were a buoy of salvation. The distance between their lips was now measured in millimeters. Maya could see the small variations of brown and amber in Elena's iris, the dilation of the pupils that betrayed the hunger the words tried to hide. The desire was no longer a secret. It was a physical presence in the room, a third element demanding acknowledgement. "Then take me away," Maya challenged, her voice tremulous, but filled with desperate provocation. "Take me somewhere where the noise in my head stops, but not as my boss, not as my protector." Elena closed her eyes for a second, a look of pain crossing her face. She seemed to be waging an internal battle against every instinct of preservation that had brought her to the top of that city. When she opened them again, the determination was absolute. She released Maya's neck and stepped back, but only to grab the car key off the table. She said nothing. She simply extended her hand, palm up, waiting. It was both an invitation and a surrender at the same time. Maya looked at Elena's hand, at the lifeline etched on her skin, and realized that crossing that door with her meant leaving behind the Maya she knew. The elevator descended at a speed that made Maya's stomach float. They did not touch inside the mirrored metal box, but the tension was so high that the air seemed to crack. Elena watched the number panel, her hands crossed in front of her, the director's composure back, yet her breathing was heavy, audible in the small space. When the doors opened in the underground parking, the air was cold and smelled of concrete and tires. The silver SUV was there, waiting like a sleeping beast under the fluorescent lights that flickered rhythmically. Elena opened the door for her. It wasn't a chivalrous gesture. It was an act of possession. Maya got in, feeling the cold leather against her back. When Elena turned around and sat in the driver's seat, she didn't start the car immediately. She stayed there, hands on the wheel, staring into nothing. The rain had returned outside, and the muffled sound of water beating on the parking lot's vent outlets created a hypnotic beat. Maya extended her hand, and this time, did not hesitate. She touched the back of Elena's hand, her fingers tracing the knuckles. "Where are we going?" Maya asked. Elena turned her face toward her, and the smile that appeared was something Maya had never seen before. It was broken, real, and dangerously sweet. "To the one place where I can't pretend I don't want you," Elena replied, shifting into gear. The car glided out of the building, merging with Seattle's night. Maya looked at the envelope that had stayed behind, fallen on the office floor, and felt that, along with it, she had left all her security behind. She had thought she'd escaped Elena's control. She was wrong. She had just handed over the keys. The engine's sound faded into a silence that seemed to have its own weight, something that settled between the leather seats and made breathing difficult. They were in Elena's luxury condo garage, where the concrete was so clean it reflected the headlights fading away. Maya didn't move. She looked at her own hands, still bearing the ghost of Elena's touch, a numbness rising through her arms. The air conditioning gave one last icy sigh before dying. "Why don't you get out of the car, Maya?" Elena's question was low, almost a whisper against the dark glass. "Because I don't know if I should have gotten in," Maya answered, finally finding the courage to look to the side. Elena didn't hold the gaze. She opened the door, and the sound of her heels on the concrete floor echoed like the ticking of a hurried clock. Maya followed, feeling small under the cold, even lighting of the garage. The elevator was private, clad in wood panels that smelled of expensive wax and something old, despite all the technology. During the ascent, Elena faced the digital floor display. A hand closed around the bag strap, the knuckles standing out from the grip. She didn't look at Maya once, but the space between them felt charged, as if physical proximity was exhausting the available oxygen. When the doors opened directly into the living room, Maya stopped. The apartment was vast, a succession of grays, whites, and glass facing Seattle's skyline, now dotted with the rain's trembling lights. There was no mess, no family photos, no warmth of a home lived in with hurry. It felt like an art gallery where silence was the main piece. "You're soaked," Elena said, tossing the keys onto a black granite counter without looking where they fell. "I'll get a towel. Stay here." "I can leave, Elena. I just need—" Maya's sentence was interrupted by the sound of a closet door opening in the background. "I don't need you to take care of me like this." Elena returned with a white silk robe and a fluffy towel. She walked up to Maya and, without asking permission, began drying her hair. The gesture was brusque at first, almost impatient, but softened as the heat of Maya's skin transferred to Elena's hands. Maya closed her eyes, smelling lavender from the towel, and feeling the warmth emanating from Elena, who was now dangerously close. She could hear Elena's rhythmic heartbeat, or maybe her own, echoing in her temples. "You need to stop fighting against everything I try to do for you," Elena murmured, hands stopping on Maya's shoulders, the towel still covering the younger woman's head. "This isn't a war, Maya. Sometimes it feels like it is," Maya said, her voice muffled by the fabric. "Because you don't help. You replace. You took my job. You control how I get home. What's left for me?" Elena released the towel, letting it fall over Maya's shoulders like a mantle. Her eyes were now fixed on Maya's, an intensity that made the floor feel unstable. "The fact that you are here, with me?" Elena stepped forward, forcing Maya to back against the cold glass wall. The contrast between the glass's ice and Elena's heat was almost unbearable. The thing we can't say in the cafe with 10 people watching. Loving someone without the guarantee that this love won't erase you is a tightrope many walk every day. If you've ever felt someone's care turning into a shadow that keeps you from seeing the sun, maybe this story is a mirror for you. If what Maya is feeling right now resonates in your chest, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's your presence here that allows these voices to keep being heard. Maya felt Elena's fingertips brush the side of her neck, climbing toward her ear. It was a calculated touch, light enough to be a command, but heavy enough to take Maya's breath away. Elena didn't avert her gaze. There was sadness there, a fatigue that the executive's armor could no longer hide. "I don't know how to be any other way." Elena's confession came out dragging, the words seeming to cost physical effort. "I've spent my whole life making sure nothing ever falls out of place. And then you appeared, with that dirty apron of yours and this habit of accepting rides from anyone. And I realized I had no control over anything." "You don't need to have control over me," Maya whispered, her hand rising hesitantly to touch Elena's wrist, feeling the other woman's pulse quicken beneath her fingertips. "You just need to be here." "I don't know if I know how to just be." Elena tilted her head, their breath now merging with Maya's. The space between them had vanished, leaving only the vibration of desire and the invisible barrier of fear. "I feel that if I loosen the reins by even a millimeter, you'll vanish into the rain, and I can't allow that. You're suffocating me, Elena." Maya's voice was a whisper, but it struck Elena like a shout. Elena's hand froze on Maya's face. For a second, the mask of authority fell completely, revealing a woman who seemed to be drowning in the middle of the living room. She jerked her hand back, stepping 2 steps away, the soles of her shoes creaking on the polished floor. She walked to the large window and pressed both hands against the glass, gazing into the darkness of Seattle. Her shoulders rose and fell with force. "Then go," Elena said, without turning. "The door isn't locked. The elevator is waiting. If I am only suffocation to you, Maya, go away. Now." Maya stood still. The satin robe was still on the chair beside her, Elena's umbrella leaning against the wall. She looked at the oak door, the exit to the life she knew, a life of doubled shifts, late buses, and the freedom of being invisible. Then she looked at Elena's back, at the fragility hidden in that rigid posture. The silence returned to flood the apartment, but it was no longer the silence of a gallery. It was the silence of a breaking point, where weeks of tension and possessive care had finally cracked the surface. "Do you really want me to go?" Maya asked, her voice firm for the first time that night. Elena did not answer. She simply closed her eyes, her forehead pressed against the cold glass, while Washington rain continued to fall, relentless, erasing the boundaries between what was cared for and what was just fear of being left alone in one's own perfection. Maya's exhaustion was not physical. It was the weight of a choice she knew would change everything. She stepped toward the door, and the sound of her bare feet on the floor seemed like a crash in that void. The metallic sound of the elevator doors closing was the loudest closing punctuation Maya had ever heard. She stood there, in the cold, sterile atrium of the building, while the digital numbers climbed back up to the 40th floor, leaving her alone with the smell of ozone and rain that blew in through the revolving door. The asphalt outside was black and shiny, reflecting the emptiness of a Seattle that no longer seemed hers. Maya did not call a rideshare. She did not open the expensive umbrella she still held. She simply began walking toward Capitol Hill, feeling the weight of every step, as if the air had suddenly grown denser, harder to pass through. The distance between them was no longer measured in floors or kilometers, but by a silence that stretched like fog over Lake Union. 3 days passed without the rumble of the SUV's engine under the yellow streetlight. 3 days without the scent of espresso and citrus notes filling the cafe air, before Elena even appeared. Maya worked on autopilot. Her fingers moved with mechanical precision. Grind, tamp, vaporize, serve. Her eyes, however, kept darting to the glass door every time the bell rang, a conditioned reflex she detested. Mark tried to speak to her on Tuesday, offering a donut he had brought from a craft bakery on Pike Place, but Maya only shook her head, her gaze lost in the latte foam she was drawing. "You're spaced out, Maya," Mark commented, leaning on the service counter, trying to force a familiarity she had no room to give. "That woman, the director, she hasn't come by since." "She has a name, Mark," Maya replied, her voice harsher than she intended. Her fingers clenched the edge of the counter, the rough wood under her nails. "And she has more important things to do than watch my shift. I just thought that..." He shrugged, picking up the donut. "Never mind. You seem better on your own. Less watched." The word echoed in Maya's mind as she wiped a milk stain from the counter. She should feel free. She should be celebrating that no one was buying her time off or controlling her rides, but freedom tasted like ash and cold coffee. Without Elena's shadow, the world looked faded. She found herself stroking the sleeve of her uniform, a nervous tic she had developed to imitate Elena's gesture when anxious. The silence in the Capitol Hill apartment was now a physical presence, a monster feeding on unanswered questions, and the brown envelope she had picked up from the floor before leaving that living room, and now lay untouched on her dining table. Autumn in Washington did not forgive. The wind blew from the sea, bringing a chill that slipped through the window gaps and made the building's wooden structure creak. On Thursday night, she sat on the kitchen floor, back against the loud refrigerator, and finally opened the envelope. There was no money. There was no contract. There was only a deed to a small art studio near Fremont, in Maya's name, and a note written on letterhead, with firm handwriting that seemed hurried. "For so you never have to accept anything you don't want again. For so your time is your own." Maya felt a knot tighten in her throat, a dry cry that wouldn't rise. Elena's gesture wasn't blackmail. It was a clumsy, almost childish attempt to apologize for her own controlling nature. Elena didn't know how to give space without offering the whole world as collateral that the other person wouldn't run away. And now, with the deed in her hands, Maya realized the extent of the loss. They had broken at the exact moment they tried to protect each other. She stood up, her knees cracking in the apartment's silence, and walked to the window. The city outside continued on, indifferent to the agony of two women who didn't know how to love each other without suffocating. Damn it, Elena, Maya whispered to the fogged glass, her forehead pressed against the cold surface. She took the coat and went out. The night air was biting, charged with the smell of damp earth and distant chimney smoke. She didn't know where she was going until she found herself in front of the glass building downtown. The facade was dark, except for a single light on the 40th floor. Maya stood on the opposite sidewalk, hands buried in her pockets, watching that bright spot in the vast blackness. She imagined Elena inside, surrounded by her gray perfection, looking toward the horizon and waiting for a sign that Maya wasn't sure she could give. Guilt was a heavy companion. Maya felt guilty for having left, for having called Elena's care sick, for having desired freedom and now not knowing what to do with it. But above all, she missed the electricity. That tension that made her skin tingle just from hearing Elena's footsteps. She crossed the street, her heart beating against her ribs like a caged bird. The security guard at the reception recognized her, and, after a hesitation that seemed to last hours, allowed the elevator to proceed. The ascent was different this time. There was no expectation of confrontation, only the fatigue of a longing that had lasted far too long. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, the office was cloaked in a bluish shadow, cut only by Elena's desk lamp. Elena wasn't at the window. She was sitting on the floor, back against the marble desk, surrounded by scattered papers she didn't seem strong enough to organize. The crystal glass was beside her, empty. "You forgot to lock the door," Maya said, hoarse, stopping at the doorway. Elena raised her face slowly. Her eyes were red, her skin paler than usual, and the expensive blazer lay tossed on a nearby chair. She looked human, unarmored. For the first time, the director of storytelling didn't have a script to follow. "I don't care if anyone comes in, Maya," Elena answered, her voice a thread barely carrying through the room. "I have nothing here inside worth protecting." Maya walked toward her, stepping over the papers on the floor. She sat beside Elena, keeping a safe distance but feeling the warmth that still emanated from that broken woman. The silence between them was no longer defensive. It was exhausted. Elena looked at Maya, a gaze asking forgiveness for things she still couldn't put into words. Her hand, the same instrument of control Maya had feared, moved slowly across the carpet, stopping a millimeter from Maya's hand. "I tried not to go to the cafeteria," Elena confessed, short of breath. "I swore I wouldn't follow you. I spent 3 days in this room looking at the phone, waiting for you to call to say you hated me. It would be easier if you hated me." "I don't hate you," Maya replied, turning her hand so the palm faced up, a silent invitation. "But I can't be your asset, Elena. I'm not something you can plan." "I know." Elena closed her eyes, a lone tear tracing a path down her cheek. "But when I look at you, I feel the world is finally in the right place, and I'm so afraid the world will move again." Maya extended her fingers and touched Elena's pulse, feeling the erratic rhythm of her heart. There was no explosive desire as before, only a painful tenderness, an awareness that their love was a fragile construction in a city of strong winds. Elena tilted her head to the side, resting it on Maya's shoulder, a surrendering gesture that broke the rest of Maya's defenses. They stayed there, on the floor of a multi-million-dollar office, two women lost in what they felt, trying to find a way back that did not involve bars, even if they were made of gold. The clock on the wall read 2 a.m. The rain outside had stopped, giving way to a deceptively calm quiet. Maya knew that tomorrow would bring the same questions, the same struggles for autonomy, and Elena's same possessive fears. Nothing was resolved. The loss was still there, haunting the room's shadows, reminding them that love, by itself, isn't always enough to heal what was shaped by the need to control. "What do we do now?" Elena asked, her voice muffled against Maya's shoulder. Maya looked at the city view, at the lights that were starting to fade. "Now, we just stay here. No plans, no scripts, just silence." Elena squeezed Maya's hand with a desperate force, as if testing whether she was still real. They thought the return would be the end of longing. They were wrong. The return was only the beginning of a much harder journey, learning to love without possessiveness. The light filtering through the studio's industrial windows in Fremont did not have the cold hardness of the 40th floor. It was a diffuse brightness, filtered by Seattle's persistent fog, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. Maya ran a finger along the edge of a blank screen, feeling the rough texture of the linen. The smell of turpentine and old wood was her new oxygen. It had been a week since she had stepped foot in the cafeteria, a week since the stained apron uniform had been folded at the bottom of a drawer, and the silence of that spacious space was her only company. She looked at the phone resting on the counter. No messages, no control call, no questions about where she was or who she intended to leave with. Freedom, she discovered, carried a weight that made her shoulders bend in a new way. "You're going to end up breaking that screen just by looking at it." Elena's voice came from the door, but there wasn't the commanding tone of before. Maya turned slowly. Elena stood at the threshold, her hands buried in the pockets of a brushed wool coat, without the high-heeled shoes that made her seem unreachable. She looked smaller in that environment of high ceilings and exposed bricks. Elena did not enter. She waited, her dark eyes scanning the space with a caution that was almost painful, as if she feared that her mere presence could bring down what Maya was trying to build there. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant sound of a freighter blowing its horn in the canal just ahead. It seemed Elena didn't know whether Maya wanted her to come. "You have the key, Elena. The place is technically still yours," Maya answered, smoothing the sleeve of her flannel shirt, seeking a foothold. "No, it isn't." Elena stepped forward, but stopped right after. "I registered everything in your name. I said it wasn't a contract. I am trying to fulfill my part." Elena walked to one of the windows, looking out at the warehouses and the gray water of Lake Washington. She appeared to be fighting an impulse to comment on the neighborhood's security or the studio's lighting. Maya watched her profile, the way she pressed her lips, a line of tension that didn't want to go away. It was strange to see her like this, stripped of the marble table and corporate authority. It was as if the city of Seattle had finally managed to enter Elena's skin, bringing with it all its melancholy and uncertainty. "It's difficult, isn't it?" Maya asked, approaching, but keeping a distance that allowed both to breathe. "What is?" Elena turned, her eyes seeking Maya's with contained urgency, standing there without telling me what to do, without planning the next 10 minutes of my life to make sure I don't hurt myself. Elena let out a short laugh, a dry sound that didn't reach her eyes. She lowered her head and lightly kicked a splash of dried paint on the floor. The gesture was so human, so devoid of elegance, that Maya felt a tightening in her chest. Elena was a woman built on certainties, and watching her feel around in the dark was almost more intimate than any physical touch they had shared. "It's unbearable," Elena confessed, her voice now a whisper. "I drive to the corner of your street every night. I stop the car, look at your window, and stay 5 minutes with my hand on the key, struggling not to go upstairs. I want to know if you locked the door. I want to know if you ate something that wasn't industrialized. But I start the engine and drive away." "Why do you drive away?" "Because I promised I wouldn't be your heir." Elena stepped toward Maya, and this time the heat coming from her wasn't predatory. It was a plea, and I realized that if I don't learn to let you breathe on your own, you'll never want to breathe by my side. Loving someone without the guarantee that this care won't become a prison is the greatest challenge the heart can face. If you've ever felt you needed to distance yourself from someone you love to avoid losing yourself, perhaps you understand the silence that now surrounds Maya and Elena. If you believe that true love is the one that learns to let go in order to be able to hold on again someday, subscribe to the channel. Your presence helps tell these stories of those trying to get it right, even when everything seems to be going off script. Maya felt Elena's fingertips brush the back of her hand. It was an electric, but calm, contact. Elena did not squeeze. She simply left her hand there, offered. Maya intertwined her fingers with Elena's, feeling the fine texture of Elena's skin against hers, which now bore traces of paint and solvent. They did not hug. They simply stayed there, in the middle of that unfinished studio, connected by that small piece of physical contact that carried the weight of total surrender. "I don't want you to stop caring, Elena," Maya said, the voice soft but firm. "I only want you to understand that I can take care of myself, and that I choose you, not because you protect me from the world, but because the world is better when I have you to come back to. I feel like I'm learning a new language," Elena murmured, bringing her face closer, their breath softly touching Maya's forehead. "A language where I love you does not mean I possess you. It's a beautiful language." Maya closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel Elena's citrus scent, which now seemed less aggressive, more welcoming. "You're doing well in the first lesson." Elena let out a long sigh, as if releasing air she'd held for years. She leaned in and pressed her forehead against Maya's, a gesture of trust that broke the last ice barrier still between them. The studio, with its blank canvases and its smell of beginnings, seemed the only place in the world where they could be just two women, without titles, without roles, without the baggage of needing to control everything to avoid breaking. "I brought something," Elena said, stepping back a little and searching for something in the coat's pocket. It was a small brass key, attached to a simple leather keychain. "It's from my home, the real home, in Bainbridge, not the office, not Seattle's condo." Maya looked at the key in Elena's palm. It wasn't a property contract, nor an order to move. It was an invitation, an open door that Maya could choose to cross or not. Elena wasn't buying her time right then. She was offering hers. Maya took the key, the metal still warm from Elena's body, and felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. "Will you let me take the bus there?" Maya teased, though her eyes sparkled with a moisture she couldn't hide. "I am going to hate every minute of this." Elena smiled, and this time the smile was complete, lighting her face in a way that made her look 10 years younger. "But I will be waiting for you on the pier, with an umbrella, and no orders about what you should do when you arrive." Maya's laugh was light, filling the studio and dispelling the melancholy that seemed to be the city's hallmark. They began walking toward the exit, side by side, without needing constant contact, but with the certainty that the distance between them was now a choice, not an abyss. The industrial elevator creaked as it descended, and when they stepped out onto the street, Seattle's rain had turned into a fine, golden drizzle from the sun behind the clouds. Elena walked to her car, but before getting in, she stopped and looked at Maya, who was still on the sidewalk. "Maya?" "Yes?" "Thank you for not leaving when I asked," Elena said, her gaze deep, filled with gratitude that words barely could contain. Maya simply nodded, a smile playing on her lips. She watched Elena start the car and pull away slowly, respecting the rhythm of the street, respecting the space that was now sacred. Maya breathed in the damp Fremont air, feeling that, for the first time, she wasn't being carried by anyone. She was walking on her own, and the path, though uncertain, seemed brighter than any office light. The sun finally set, and Seattle's lights began to twinkle one by one. In the studio, the blank canvas waited for its first mark. And in Maya's bag, the brass key was the promise that the end wasn't a closing, but an opening to something neither of them needed to control anymore. The ferry to Bainbridge Island cut through the gray waters of Puget Sound, leaving behind Seattle's imposing silhouette, as if undoing a knot that had been too tight. The wind blowing from the ocean was relentless, carrying salt and a cold that seemed to pierce even the heaviest coat. Maya leaned against the metal railing, her hair whipped by the wind, watching the white foam the hull created. Elena was beside her, but she didn't try to shield her from the cold. She was just there, hands buried in her pockets, eyes fixed on the horizon where the island's green, dense trees began to take shape. The silence between them no longer held the pressure of an imminent storm. It was a silence of exhaustion, but also a truce that neither wanted to break. "You're freezing," Elena finally said, her voice almost carried away by the sound of the engines and the seagulls following the ferry. "I'm fine," Maya answered, not looking at her. Her cheeks were red, and the tip of her nose burned with the cold. "It feels good to feel my face tingle a little. It makes me feel awake." Elena nodded slowly. She didn't offer her coat, nor suggest they go inside the heated cabin where the other passengers read newspapers and drank coffee from paper cups. She simply stepped to the side, reducing the distance between their shoulders until the sleeves of their coats touched. It was a minimal gesture, a silent plea for closeness that Maya accepted by not moving away. The ferry jolted, and Maya felt Elena's arm weighed against hers for another brief moment. The warmth passed through the layers of fabric, a physical reminder that the woman beside her was no longer just an authority figure in a glass office, but someone who was there, vulnerable to the wind, as much as she was. The Bainbridge house was nothing like the Seattle luxury condo. It was a dark wood building, with cedar shingles that seemed to have absorbed decades of rain and mist. It was nestled among Douglas firs and madronas, with a porch that opened directly onto a pebble beach. The smell there was different. There was no scent of asphalt or expensive cleaning products. It smelled of wet earth, pine needles, and the salty perfume of low tide. Elena unlocked the door with the same key Maya now carried in her pocket, and the metallic click seemed to echo through the surrounding forest. "It's rustic," Maya commented, stepping into the entry hall. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet, a cozy sound that seemed to tell stories of winters past. "It belonged to my grandmother," Elena said, tossing the keys into a handmade ceramic bowl. "I come here when Seattle starts to feel too small, or when I feel I am getting too small for Seattle." Elena walked to the stone fireplace and began stacking the logs with a near-sacred concentration. Maya watched her from the open-plan kitchen, noticing how Elena's movements were less precise there, more hesitant. She didn't have an assistant to light the fire or an automatic climate control system. She had only her own hands and the dry wood. Maya moved closer, seeing frustration grow on Elena's face as the match kept going out before it could catch the tinder. "Let me try," Maya murmured, kneeling beside her on the wool rug. "I can do this, Maya," Elena replied, but there wasn't the earlier aggression. There was only a transparent weariness. "I know you can, but I want to help." Maya took the box of matches from her hands. Their fingers brushed, and for a moment, the two remained still, kneeling before the cold ashes. The warmth of the fireplace hadn't yet arrived, but the temperature between them rose sharply. Elena didn't withdraw her hand. She watched Maya strike the match and shield it with her palm until the flame caught on the paper and began to lick the wood. The light of the fire started dancing on the wooden walls, painting Elena's face with amber tones and shadows. The hardness of her features seemed to melt under that wavering light. She sat back on her heels, watching the fire grow, and then looked at Maya. It wasn't the look of someone who forbids rides or buys days off. It was the look of someone who was lost, and for the first time, did not care about not knowing the way back. "I feel like I don't know what to say to you when I'm not giving orders," Elena confessed, her voice low, blending with the crackling of burning wood. "Then don't say anything," Maya suggested, sitting on the floor, her back resting against the worn sofa. "The silence here is different from the silence in the office. Here it doesn't feel like a wall, it feels like a space." Elena hesitated, but ended up sitting beside her. The rug was soft and carried a faint smell of smoke. They stayed there for a long time, watching the flames devour the logs. It started to rain outside, a soft drumming on the cedar roof that seemed to insulate them from the rest of the world. Maya could feel the tension leaving her shoulders. There, in Bainbridge, Seattle's rules didn't apply. Elena wasn't the senior director, and Maya wasn't the exhausted attendant. They were simply two women trying to figure out how to coexist without destroying each other. "Will you stay?" Elena asked, not looking at her. Her hands were fidgety, playing with the hem of the khaki pants. "For how long?" Maya returned the question, feeling her heart race. "I don't know. Until the rain stops, or until you feel you need to go home." Elena finally turned her face toward her. There was a disarming honesty in her eyes that took Maya's breath away. "I'm not going to stop you from leaving, Maya. The door isn't locked. I promised." Maya reached out, and this time, she was the one who sought contact. Their fingers found each other, intertwining slowly, feeling every texture of the skin, every tiny imperfection that constant control had usually hidden. Elena squeezed Maya's hand with a force that was, at once, a safe harbor and a cry for help. The romantic tension, which had previously been a rope stretched to the max, was now a gentle current pulling them toward each other. Elena leaned forward slowly, closing the little space that remained. The kiss wasn't a burst. It was a conversation they had been postponing for months. It tasted like coffee, like salt, and like a truth that neither of them could deny any longer. The physical contact was cautious, as if they were rediscovering each other's bodies under a new light. Elena's hand went up to Maya's face, her thumb tracing the contour of her lower lip, with a delicacy that contrasted with everything she had been until then. Maya sighed against Elena's mouth, feeling fear and resistance dissipate like fog over a canal. There was no rush, no need to prove anything. There was only the awareness that, in that moment, in that wooden house in the middle of the forest, they were exactly who they were meant to be. "You're trembling," Elena whispered between the kisses, foreheads touching. "It's the fire," Maya lied, a faint smile forming on her lips. "It's getting warm in here." Elena laughed, a low, vibrant sound that Maya felt in her own chest. They drew apart just enough to look at each other again. The fireplace now burned vigorously, lighting the room with a warm, golden glow. The world outside, with its prohibitions, its glass offices, and its forbidden rides, seemed to belong to another life, another version of themselves that they had left on the ferry. "I think I can learn," Elena said, her voice steadier now, "to be just me, without graphs, without goals. I think I'd like to meet this version of you," Maya replied, resting her head on Elena's shoulder. The night moved over the island, and the rain in Bainbridge became a constant whisper, a backdrop for the new cadence they were creating. They did not make plans for Monday in Seattle. They did not discuss the studio in Fremont, or who would take whom home. In the quiet, shared by that room, with the smell of burnt wood and skin still warm from the newly discovered touch, they understood that redemption was not a final destination, but the courage to stay when all that had been learned was how to run or control. Elena stood up to fetch 2 mugs of tea, and Maya watched her walk across the kitchen, noticing how her steps were lighter, as if she had finally released a burden too heavy at the house's entrance. When Elena returned, she handed the mug to Maya and sat down again. But this time, she pulled Maya closer, until they were completely wrapped around each other. The warmth of the tea and the warmth of Elena's body merged into a sense of security Maya never thought she would find in the arms of the woman who had once forbidden her to accept a ride. "What happens now?" Maya asked, closing her eyes and feeling the steady beat of Elena's heart against her back. Elena hesitated to answer. She looked at the brass key that Maya had left on the coffee table, shining under the firelight. "It stays us, Maya. No guarantees, only the desire to see what happens tomorrow." The rain continued to fall, washing the streets of Seattle and the forests of Bainbridge. But inside that house, something new had begun to grow. It wasn't perfect, and they knew there would be days when Elena's instinct to control and Maya's instinct to resist would collide again. But for the first time, they had a place to return to, a place where silence was an invitation, and where the only ride that mattered was the one they gave to each other, toward a future that didn't yet have a name, but finally had a home. Maya looked out the window and saw her own reflection mixed with the shadows of the trees. She no longer felt as if she were disappearing. She felt that amidst all that tension and possessiveness, they had found a slit of light. And, as the fire in the fireplace transformed into red, lasting embers, Maya realized that life didn't need a final script. She just needed someone who knew when to hold her hand, and when, finally, to let her fly. The last ember snapped in the fireplace, a small sound amid the vastness of Washington's night. Elena drifted to sleep with her face buried in Maya's neck, a surrender that was worth more than any public declaration. Maya stayed awake for a few more minutes, listening to the sounds of the forest and the water, feeling Elena's comforting weight against her chest. She knew the sun would rise over Puget Sound in a few hours, bringing the real world with it. But for now, the world was just that rug, that fire, and the quiet promise that no matter what happened, they would not be alone in the rain anymore. And if tomorrow is only the beginning of a story that we still don't know how to tell, you still do this, you know? Maya's voice came out muffled, her face pressed against Elena's shirt linen. "Do what?" Elena asked, but the movement of her fingers through Maya's hair didn't stop. It was a rhythmic caress, almost unconscious, as if she were counting the strands to make sure none had moved. "You count. My heartbeat, my breathing. You try to time how long it takes me to wake up." The silence that followed in the large Bainbridge Island room was filled only by the sound of rain tapping on the madrone leaves outside. Elena did not deny it. She only pulled the embrace a little tighter, feeling Maya's warmth against her chest. Washington morning sun was a pale promise behind the clouds, but inside, under the Egyptian cotton sheets that now smelled of linseed oil and coffee, the world seemed to have stopped spinning at the frenetic pace of Seattle offices. Elena let out a long sigh, the tip of her nose brushing Maya's temple. "Old habits die slowly, Maya. You know that. I spent 20 years being paid to predict the next disaster. It's hard to turn off the switch when the next disaster is the only thing I truly care about losing. I'm not a disaster, Elena. I'm just someone who likes to sleep 10 more minutes on Sundays." Maya stepped back a little, just enough to look into the other woman's eyes. There was a lightness there that hadn't existed months ago. Maya's dark circles had faded, replaced by a vitality that came from hours spent in the studio in Fremont, painting without the weight of a timer. Elena reached out and touched Maya's cheek, her thumb tracing the line of a small blue ink mark she hadn't managed to wash off the night before. The touch was light, free from the harsh possessiveness that had previously defined every interaction between them. It was a touch of recognition. Elena looked at Maya as if she were in front of a work of art she no longer dared to try to restore, simply to contemplate. "The coffee will get cold," Elena whispered, but she did not rise. "Let it cool. I like it bitter anyway." The mornings in Bainbridge had become their sanctuary. The ferry, which had once represented an escape, was now just the way home. Elena still had her office in Seattle, still chaired meetings that decided the fate of multi-million-dollar productions, but there was something different in the way she walked through the door. She no longer carried the city on her shoulders. She left the weight at the harbor, trading the silk armor for wool sweaters, and the quiet shared with Maya. In the kitchen, the smell of toasted bread and rosemary began to fill the space. Maya stood by the wooden counter, watching Elena attempt, yet again, to deal with the manual coffee maker that Maya had insisted on bringing. Elena looked at the filter with an intensity that suggested she was about to fire the object. Her shoulders were tense, her lips pressed into that fine line Maya knew so well. "Are you trying to control the filtering time again?" Maya asked, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed over her chest. "The pressure isn't right, Maya. If the water goes through too fast, the flavor is lost. If it takes too long, it gets sour. There's a balance." Elena stopped, noticing Maya's ironic smile. She slipped the glass carafe with a soft snap and sighed, her hands rising to massage her temples. "I'm doing it again, aren't I? A little, but we're getting better. At least you didn't try to buy the coffee maker's factory to change the design." Elena let out a short laugh, a rare and precious sound that made Maya's chest vibrate. She walked over to Maya and stopped a few centimeters away, the heat of their bodies mixing in the cool morning air. Elena didn't touch her immediately. She just stood there, letting the silence speak. There was a constant electricity between them, a tension that was no longer made of fear or friction, but of an attraction that renewed itself with every small choice to stay. "I saw the gallery contract in Pioneer Square," Elena said, her voice dropping to that confidant tone she reserved only for late nights. "They want all of your paintings from the Rain Over the Cement series." "I know. They called me yesterday afternoon." "And?" Elena tilted her head, her dark eyes searching for any sign of hesitation. "You seem contained." "I haven't answered yet. I was thinking about how you would react." Elena frowned, her hand rising to Maya's sweater collar, smoothing the fabric with calculated distraction. "Why does my reaction matter to your success, Maya? You've worked on this for months. Those canvases are yours. Every brushstroke was your fight with the world. Because I know you know the owner of that gallery. I know you two play tennis on Thursdays. And I spent the whole night wondering if that invitation happened because I'm good, or because you moved the pieces again." The air between them cooled. Elena removed her hand from Maya's collar, her face turning back to that mask of impassivity she wore to protect herself. She turned and walked to the window, watching the fog dissipate over the water. The silence returned to be a wall, but this time, it was a glass wall, transparent, yet still a barrier. Maya felt a knot in her stomach. She didn't want to fight. Not there, not now. But doubt was a poison she needed to expel so they could move forward. "I didn't call him Maya," Elena said, without turning. Her voice was laden with a hurt she tried to hide beneath the professional cadence. "I didn't move a single piece. Actually, he asked me about you at the club, and I changed the subject. I said I don't discuss business in my personal life." "Elena," Maya began, taking a step forward. "I had to fight against every instinct not to do this," Elena continued, hands gripping the edge of the sink tightly. "I wanted to buy the whole gallery just to make sure no one said anything bad about your paintings. I wanted to guarantee you the best spot on the wall, the best light, the best audience. But I didn't. I stayed in my office, staring at the phone, and I didn't call." Maya stood behind her. She reached out and placed her hands gently on Elena's back, sensing the tension in the director's muscles. Elena let out a tremulous sigh, but did not move away. "Why didn't you call?" Maya whispered, her breath near Elena's neck. "Because I remembered the day you left that office on the 40th floor. I remembered the sound of that door closing, and I realized that if I built your success for you, I would be building another wall, and I don't want walls between us anymore, Maya. I just want you." Maya hugged Elena from behind, threading her fingers over her abdomen. She felt Elena relax against her body, her head tilting back, resting on Maya's shoulder. There, in that embrace, Maya's doubts evaporated like Seattle fog under the first rays of sun. Elena was learning. It hurt. It cost her ego and sense of control, but she was learning to love without trying to possess the other's destiny. Loving someone who tends to control the world is to accept that, sometimes, the greatest proof of love is silence and inaction. If you've ever felt you needed to prove your worth on your own, even with someone powerful by your side willing to make things easier, you understand Maya's struggle. And if you've ever had to hold your own hand to avoid interfering in someone you love, you know Elena's pain. If this story of renunciation and growth touches you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This is where we explore the shadows and the lights of what it really means to be together. Will you accept the gallery's invitation? Elena asked after a while, turning in Maya's arms. I will, but with one condition. Which? You will go to the opening as my guest, not as director Elena, not as the woman who knows everyone. You'll go as the woman who wakes up with me in Bainbridge and who still doesn't know how to make coffee without trying to control the water temperature. Elena smiled. It wasn't a victory smile, it was a peace smile. She touched the tip of Maya's nose with hers, a gesture of affection that would have been unthinkable a year ago. I can do that, but I can't promise I won't give a dirty look to any critic who dares say there's a lack of technique in your colors. I can deal with dirty looks, as long as at the end of the night, you take me home. I always take you home, Elena murmured, her voice husky, lips seeking Maya's in a kiss that sealed this new agreement. The afternoon on Bainbridge Island went by slowly. They walked along the pebble beach, picking smooth stones and listening to the rhythmic sound of the tide rising. There was no urgency, no carpooling prohibitions or brown envelopes left on wooden counters. There was only the continuity of a life they were learning to write together, one page at a time, with all the spelling mistakes and the erasures that humanity demands. When night fell, and the West Point lighthouse began sweeping the horizon with its cyclical beam of light, they sat on the wooden house veranda. The cold was returning, but they had each other's warmth and the promise that tomorrow would be exactly as they chose, with no predefined scripts. You know what? Maya said, watching Seattle's lights glow in the distance across the water. What? The view from here is much better than from the 40th floor. Elena looked at the city, then at Maya. She took Maya's hand and brought it to her lips, kissing the knuckles that still carried the scent of paint. It is, Elena agreed, her gaze soft. It's because from here I can see what really matters. The silence in Bainbridge was no longer emptiness. It was a full presence, a space where two women had found redemption not through perfection, but through the courage to be imperfect together. The rain stopped, but the sound of droplets falling from the trees continued, like a silent applause for what they had built. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew that for the first time, neither of them was trying to control the wind. They were simply learning to sail. Elena rose and reached out her hand to Maya. Shall we go in? It's getting late. Maya took her hand, feeling the firmness and the softness that coexisted there. They walked into the house, leaving the door unlocked, because there was nothing left to fear on the outside. What they had was real. It was theirs, and it didn't need bars to remain. And if the greatest act of control is, finally, to allow oneself not to control anything, and if happiness isn't the end of the story, but only the shared silence before a new page begins. The porch light went out, and the wooden house fused with the shadow of the Washington forest. The world continued out there, but there, in the small space between two hearts that learned to beat in the same rhythm, the story had found its breathing point, and who knows what tomorrow will bring.